Hey everyone, Gaijin Goomba here, and today I want to do something a little bit different. For 5 years now, I've been covering cultural origins of video games ranging from classics like Mario and Zelda, to indies like Bendy and the Ink Machine, to mainstream games like Overwatch. But today, I want to talk about the culture of eSports. Understandably, there's a lot I could cover there. I mean, you've got the popularization of MOBAs like League and Dota, but you've also got FPS team shooters like the aforementioned Overwatch and Splatoon that are quickly rising in popularity within the eSports world. But the other day, I realized there was an esport that I've been overlooking like crazy. A game that's been getting a lot of attention over the last couple of months in the esports world, and I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to it. And the more I thought about it, and the more I researched, the more I realized that it truly is the universal language of both traditional gaming and esports gaming. Freaking soccer. Hey, you may laugh, but soccer has been extremely hot in the esports community as of late. You may not see it, but soccer has quickly become the eye catch of a lot of different gaming developers and esports broadcasters. It's just taking on various clever forms. Case in point, Overwatch. Over a year ago with their Summer Games event, Overwatch showcased a brand new brawl called Lucio Ball. 2 teams of 3 Lucio players would use melee attacks, alt fires, and ultimates to, well, play soccer. You had a goalie and 2 midfielders. It was simple, but a lot of fun for a lot of players. So much so that on August 1st, Jeff Kaplan announced not only the return of Lucio Ball, but something I didn't expect.
But we've also added a new card to the arcade that's called Copa Lucio Ball. And what this means is competitive Lucio Ball.
You heard that right, everyone. This is the first offshoot brawl in Overwatch to get its own competitive mode with its own unique rewards. Again though, this brawl is nothing but soccer using a single character, and there's no telling how serious Blizzard might get if this game continues to get even more popular this year. But this is only the beginning. On June 21st of this year, it was announced that one of the biggest traditional media channels, NBC, would begin covering Rocket League as its very first esport. This is monumental considering how resistant traditional media has been in showcasing esports games. And again, it's just soccer. Granted, it's gravity-defying, nitro-boosting car soccer, but it's still soccer. Finally, when it comes down to sports games as a collective, I'm sorry guys, nothing beats FIFA. I mean, nothing. The series claims to be the most selling sports game franchise of all time, and I believe it. Last year, FIFA 17 for Xbox One, PS4, and PC sold over 15 million copies worldwide, outperforming games like Mario Kart 8, Dark Souls 3, and even Overwatch for 2016. And certainly outperforming all of its competition from NBA 2K17 and Madden NFL 17. Finally, believe it or not, FIFA has had and continues to have a very thriving esports presence in general. So I had to step back and ask myself, why soccer of all things? I get that the love of the game comes from its simplicity. Get a ball-like object and 4 posts act as a goal space, but lots of games are simple. Basketball is literally bouncing a ball to the other side of the court to throw it in a hoop, and rugby is literally just carrying a ball across a field while trying to avoid getting clobbered. Why, of all traditional sports, is soccer headlining the esports realm? If not mechanics, then maybe there's something cultural to all this. I mean, soccer is the most celebrated sport in the world with over 3.5 billion fans, so I said, you know what? Screw it. If Matt can do a video talking about the statistical probability of Plinko, I can culturally break down the most popular sport on the globe in an attempt to understand the popularity behind it as the game begins to meld in the esports arena. My search first took me to England, the supposed home of football. Yes gang, I realize I said football. The literal rest of the world goes by that terminology, so it's only right that I respect that. Anywho, back in the Middle Ages, the English were apparently kicking balls around as far back as 1170, when cleric and administrator to Archbishop Thomas Becket wrote about his experience with the game. After dinner, all the youths of the city go into the field for the very popular game of ball. The elders, the fathers, and the men of wealth come on horseback to view the contestants of their juniors, and in their fashion sport with the young men. And there seems to be aroused in these elders a stirring of natural heat by viewing so much activity and participation in the joys of unrestrained youth. But it wasn't until 1314 that recorded texts actually name-dropped the game of football. Ironically, it was when King Edward II was in the process of banning it, citing, "Certain tumults arise from the great footballs in the fields of the public, of which many evils may arise." Yeah, apparently this was evil. But that sure as heck didn't stop the English from enjoying the game. By the 1500s, England started seeing the formation of traditional teams, fields, and goals, and on October 26, 1863, the Football Association was finally formed at the Freemasons Tavern in Great Queen Street, London, laying the foundations to modern football as we know it. and to be honest, it seriously needed it. Go look up the term mob football and you'll understand what I mean. But notice I said at the beginning that England was the supposed home of football, and the reason for that is because 400 years before England, during the Heian period in 1644 AD, Japan had their own game of kickball called kemari. But unlike the football we know today, the game is non-competitive since it's more played like hacky sack. Using a 7x7 meter space as a boundary, players would use any part of the body save for hands and arms to knock a medium-sized ball called a mari, made of deer skin and stuffed with barley grains, back and forth with the objective of not letting it hit the ground. Sounds simple enough, right? But unlike most uniforms that allow players to move freely, kemari players play in Asuka-age clothing. Yeah, try dribbling a ball with that on. At this point I was thinking, okay, 644 AD, that's pretty old. Maybe this is the ancient origin of football. But it turns out that kemari was actually Japan's take of another ancient game from China called suchu, loosely translated as kickball. And unlike kemari, suchu was competitive. Dating as far back as 221 BC, suchu was played by two teams ranging from anywhere between 2 to 16 players that would kick a leather ball stuffed with feathers across a rectangular field in hopes of kicking into their opponent's goal, which consisted of 2 poles and a cloth tied in the middle. However, not all games of suchu were won by goals alone. Players who performed fouls on the field would just straight up be deducted points, so typically games were won more so by good performance rather than raw score. Interestingly enough, the game started off as a military training exercise to keep personnel physically fit, but as time passed, it became increasingly more popular with the general public. So much so that even women and the lowest of peasants were permitted to play in tournaments. I know that may not sound like much now, but back in the early BCs, for peasants and women to be doing anything was kinda out of the ordinary. It was a sport that really brought all castes of society together. But the Chinese weren't the only ancient civilization developing a soccer-like game. Back in 1600 BC, the Mesoamericans had a kickball game of their own called polkatok. And holy cow was this game brutal. The ball itself was 30 centimeters in diameter and made of hard leather, and the Mayans kicked this thing barefoot. The objective of the game was to keep the ball in the air without using one's hand and try to get into the opposite end of their eye-shaped court. To do that with a solid leather ball that weighed almost 8 pounds was no easy task. By the end of the game, it wasn't uncommon for people to straight up die from internal bleeding and broken bones, having a ball that weighty smacking into them over and over again. And if you lose, oh man, your team captain loses his head as a sacrifice. Yeah, no pressure there, buddy. So we've gone all the way back to freaking 1600 BC, and what have we culturally learned about the game, and why the heck has it taken the world of even esports by storm? In all honesty, despite the fierce arguing from where exactly football originated from, I don't think its popularity really has anything to do with where or what culture it's from, but rather the fact that it's a concept that has graced so many cultures in general. The basic concept of football has carried itself over thousands of years to every corner of the globe, and with that much general exposure, it's absolutely no wonder why half the human population is a fan of it. Heck, all things considered, I'm actually surprised there aren't more football-like games in the esports community. I'm not saying we need to create a league for Mega Man Soccer or anything, but considering the historical lineage, centuries of popularity, and continued growth of football, I'm just surprised we don't have more of it. I know we gamers tend to roll our eyes as EA and co unveil the next iteration of FIFA, Madden, and NBA 2K, but something that bears remembering is the fact that what we call esports is quickly adapting aspects of the same sports we poke fun of. Blizzard's Overwatch League has already begun mandating rules for managers of established esports teams to regulate things like fixed salaries and healthcare. Owners of traditional sports teams are making their way into the esports world as well. Milwaukee Bucks owner Wesley Edens is already on board with creating a league esports team. Heck, there's already been stories of scandal and match fixing. For us as gamers to push so hard to make esports a legitimate thing, yet push back and mock the very basic simplicities of traditional sports like football, all we're doing is widening the divide we've been fighting years to close. But if we can put resentment aside and give a little more attention to the culture behind the traditional sports world like the NFL, NBA, and dare I say FIFA, maybe we can use that to plan for the future of esports. Like how to develop communities of not just players but fans from outside the core gaming community, to create stronger internal structures of organizations for various genres of esports. And maybe even using the history of popular sports to evolve them into games and experiences that only the world of video gaming can provide. Given how quickly esports has been hitting the mainstream this year with no slowdown in sight, I've got high hopes, guys, and I hope you do too. But thanks for watching, everyone. And hey, speaking of esports, MatPat foresaw a lot of this coming in his video about esports and ESPN almost 2 years ago. If you want to go check out his argument, click those annotations on screen. Or if you're interested in some of my other cultural analysis videos, you can find plenty of those here on the Game Theorists channel and over on my personal channel as well. But until next time, everyone, this is Gaijin Goomba, signing out.